So today we're going to talk about the testing from an AI perspective, but a lot of these things are going to apply to any kind of testing. But what I will touch on is why and how testing AI products, whether it's chips or anything else you have integrated in your services, and how that works as a whole. But first, I would love to ask, do we have people who have tested their chips or other AI products or any? Okay, let's go super broad here. So most people can say yes. Have you tested the products that you're sending right now in kind of like an intentional manner? Feel free to say hi or say yes, or just put a Y on the chat if you have tested your chips or your AI products intentionally with other people. Yes, okay, perfect. We have at least two. Amazing. That makes me happy. Most of the clients I work with have not actually done this. So don't worry if you haven't. Oh, amazing. In a WhatsApp group. Yeah, that's a great way to test. So this is quite common. People do know that they should test, and especially my clients tend to be more on the perfectionist side. So there's a lot of the kind of like, yeah, I will test, and then that day never comes, or it comes way, way, way too late. And we're going to talk about that today. So let's get going. Famous last words. This is like pre-testing. Well, it works for me, so it must work for everyone. It's like I'm a part of this target audience, so it works for me. So I'm sure it works for everyone. Or this is my favorite. I will test it when it's ready, which is literally way too late to test, because why would you test it when it is ready by default? It's a bit of an oxymoron, but something that's quite common. So why is this? It's actually really basic human things. Why don't we test, even though we do know that we should? A lot of us just wait for the perfection, so we don't want to test it until it's like there. I'll just do this one thing. I do this a lot with my clients. It's always like, let me just tweak this one thing. Let me change this, and then we'll test. And then you keep going, and then you realize that you haven't actually tested. And all these questions that you wanted to perfect, you actually should have tested to perfect. And I think the kind of like core fundamental issue with this is that we're not really taught to work with feedback. If you think about schooling, like the systems that we go through, you don't learn to be like, hey, just do what you can, like to get feedback. You go in and you're taught like, okay, you should aim for an A. You should aim for like the highest score. You should aim to be perfect. You should aim to not have any faults in any kind of grading, which goes it's the absolute opposite when it comes to testing products or testing something that you build, right? When you go testing something that you've built, the feedback should actually be useful. So it should help you learn. And if you get perfect feedback, it's kind of useless. I mean, it's nice to do like a big project for testing, and then it's like, oh, it's amazing, and you get no negative feedback. But what are you going to do with that? You're going to do nothing. Maybe you'll just be like, oh, okay, nice, now I can sell it. But when we are testing products, when we're building products, what you actually want is that non-perfect feedback. You want those insights. You want to hear what's not working. You want to hear what doesn't make sense. That's the only thing that really gives you any sort of value when it comes to testing. I found this and I absolutely love this, and it fits here perfectly. It's a kind of a more maybe philosophical way of looking at it. But like break often, not like porcelain, but like waves. When you start testing, when you start like embedding the mindset of everything that you build, just putting it out there one by one when it comes up, you don't actually break as a person. You get used to the feedback. You get used to that kind of like dialogue of like putting something out there, getting feedback. So you start to break often. Not like porcelain. When it breaks, it breaks. And I mean, you can fix it with the Japanese kintsugi, I think it was the word. But yeah, it's not about like breaking fully. It's like putting it out there all the time, break often. And yes, it's natural. It becomes natural, like the waves. They do break all the time, and it's a part of the game. It's the way it's supposed to be. So in the human side of things, I think the greatest thing to learn here is like just learn to not take things personally. And the way that you learn to do that is to actually do it, to start putting those things out there and prepare yourself. Look at it differently. Remember what I said before. This is not about getting an A. This is not about perfection. Perfect feedback is useless. You actually need that critical feedback to learn. Otherwise, you can't make your products perfect or better. But yeah, so that's just the kind of like initial testing mindset, human side. Do you have any questions when it comes to that? Anything you'd like to share? I would love to hear if you've tackled this or this has been something that you've been working with.
I would love to start the ball rolling because I know the first question is the hardest, but how do you think about it based on tech level? Because I find sometimes like it's hard to test knowing just I have natural knowledge about tech and then I give it to someone who has no knowledge and like they don't know that the airplane button is a send or something like that, right? So like things you don't even think about. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that comes a bit later, but that's actually a perfect kind of testing. So that would be like the edge cases. I often test it's what we used to find like when I used to work in like bigger consultancies, we would find like the widest range of testers. So you would get someone who doesn't even know how to use the tech properly. That would be an edge case. And then you have someone who's super techie. And especially if you are very techie, you should definitely find people who are not. I always aim for testers that have either no knowledge in the industry or in the context or are not used to the tech or the tool because those people are going to show you the things that you would not be able to see yourself because you're too embedded in the tech world. So I think like finding those people is perfect. I would always include someone who either doesn't know how the tech works or isn't a part of the kind of target audience. I think the biggest mistake you can do with testing is only testing it with people who are part of your like ideal target audience. Because then you lose out on those questions like, how do I open this? Like it could be something as simple as that. So yeah, I love that question. I definitely include people who are not the most tech savvy to get different types of insights. Anyone else? If you have any questions or anything you'd like to share, feel free to do so. And let's move forward. So here are going to be, I'm going to share a few points when it comes to, so my background is in like digital products and service design. So I've tested all kinds of products from like physical things, like membership subscriptions to digital products. And there are quite a few differences between those products and AI. And I'd love to like touch upon that a bit more. So on the left, you'll always see the kind of like traditional manual products or even just digital products, like even apps, any kind of non-AI products. So in the past or with traditional products, you have like input X and you get output X. You have a box, you write stuff, something comes out. Like it's expected, right? You know exactly what you can put in and you know exactly what can come out. You've defined exactly what is possible within that product. With AI, however, as we all know, you can input something, you can input text, and you might get X, Y, or Z. You even put the exact same prompt to the exact same tool, and you will get slightly different answers every time. So it is just not the same as all types of products, whether it's apps, digital products, or physical products. So AI just functions slightly differently, which means that the evaluation of that testing needs to be a bit different. So you need to evaluate patterns. So like more kind of like overarching ways of using the product potentially instead of individual cases. And I just added this here. If you are the only one testing your product, you are obviously an individual case. So yeah, just evaluate patterns, evaluate multiple people, get as many different people as you can to get that really good type of feedback, especially for AI, because the opportunities are way, way past what they used to be. Another example, so all types of products mostly work with like line by line logic. So you do something, you get something. You input text in a box, you press the button, and you get something. with AI, there's kind of like a mystery of the kind of like black box thought processes. So you might know some things about how it works, but you will never know how it works fully. Which means, and this I love, I would love to hear Scott's thoughts on this and this one as well, is like you can train it, you can put information into the AI in these different ways that I'm going to share a bit more about. But you will just not be 100% in control of what comes out. But when you find the right way to do it for your use case, for what you're trying to achieve with your product or service, you'll be able to get close to that perfection, which is going to be very different than it was before. Maybe before perfection was, it always does exactly the same thing. Now, maybe perfection, if we want to even aim for that, is going to be like it gives the value that I wanted to give to the user. It gives the feeling, the experience to the user that I wanted to give. And this is just a kind of like a small way of differentiating between how you can train your AI for different types of outputs. So for more creative outputs, you can maybe give it a role and a goal, try it out, see what happens when you only do that. And so you tell it what to do, but you give it a lot of freedom in what it creates and how it gets there. And then there's the showing, so you can give context of like how does that context look like? Where are you working with? Like what might the context be? And then if you're looking for more specific outputs, more closer to the old way of doing things, whereas you still can't do exactly the same every single time. And I would also question if that's what you're looking for, if you should use AI. Like if you want to have like a really simple step-by-step thing where it does exactly the same thing every single time, you don't need to use AI. Just use all the other options that we have in tech for doing that same process. But yeah, if you're looking for more specific output, you can give answers to a question, like example answers, or you can give really kind of like highlighted and vivid examples. You can show the AI what it might look like to give that, to get that experience that you're looking for. I'm not going to go super deep into here, but Scott, please feel free
Well,
to add.
I told you I wouldn't interrupt you, but I'm so excited about this topic. But I think the one thing to add is that
Yep.
it's not mutually exclusive. So what we see a lot of people do will give specific answers to specific questions. So even with Chipp, we have a chat on our website. And if people ask about pricing, I want it to respond a very specific way and list the plans and give a link to book a meeting. Other questions about like how could I use Chipp, I'm fine if it gets more creative, right? So you don't have to pick one. I think most people will have a few things in the top left they want very specific, and then a few things in the bottom right where it's like, here's some context, but make decisions. And I would just add that, creativity in one context is hallucination in another, right? It's the same thing. So you just have to figure out, like Mario is saying, is like, do I want it to be creative or is that going to be a problem? And generally, AI is good at what computers are bad at and computers are good at what AI is bad at. So if you definitely want, like you said, I put in AI, always get B, like computers are better at that, but computers can't handle a bunch of unstructured information and figure it out. So that's what AI is really good at. So yeah, great job showing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. And I think that's actually a really good point. You can definitely use the different ones in the same kind of like AI context or AI tool or AI chat, but not necessarily for each line. So if you're giving all of these to each line, so you're basically telling it, showing it everything, it can get really confused. So like you can't ask something to be creative and specific and structured in the same exact answer necessarily. This is something I notice a lot with client work when they go like too deep and they put too much of all of this for all of the steps in the process, then you start getting into a bit of an oversaturated situation with the AI. But this is its own topic and definitely super interesting to get into. But yeah, the best way to figure this all out is to, again, test it, which is the key thing we're addressing today. So what is the impact of this? So what we're evaluating is like, should evaluate the input output relationship. So a bit more fluid, a bit more focused on like, what is the value that you want to give? What is the experience? What is the emotion? What is the thing that you want that person to have at the end? not necessarily like, does it ask it in this specific way every single time? Again, like Scott said, some things obviously need to be exact, but with AI, you have this possibility to create something much bigger than that. So how are you using it? Testing is a really big part of that. I love testing things that are quite open versus like super structured, because then you see how people are using it and you start seeing how people would like to use it instead of like telling you how to use it beforehand. So using more open content, more open products in the beginning when you're starting to test, I think is a really amazing way to see how people intuitively use your product, how they try to get the value that you've told them they can get from your chips or your AI tools. But yeah. So that's just one element when it comes to testing. And again, when you think about like old school or any kind of other products, non-AI products, there are usually limited ways to use it. Again, there's usually a box or there's something you touch and you can use it in limited ways. Like I can't, in most apps, I can't shove like audio into a box that's for text. Like it's just limited. There are only specific ways to use it. Whereas with AI, as you know, I mean, it's getting pretty close to unlimited multimodal. Like you can input all kinds of things. Also, because it's free text, you can actually just talk about something that's not related to the AI, not related to the value. Like there are unlimited ways to use the tools, and of course, you can kind of like safeguard that and do things to limit that. But in general, or in the kind of like fundamental ways of using AI, it is quite unlimited. One of the most interesting things about this is that, like I said, the edge cases are a bit harder to find because you can use it in kind of endless ways, right? I can always type something completely different to the AI than what I'm supposed to be answering, for example. If it asks me a question, I can still type whatever I want, right? So actually what you need is you need more diversity in testing, I would argue, because there are way more ways to use those tools than there were or are in the more kind of traditional digital tools or other products. Also, one really good question that keeps coming up, as I live in Mexico and we work with like the Latam context, is that you can always use different languages for AI as well. And like if my tool is meant for, I've built it in English, but people are using it in Spanish, which they can, by the way, they can use it in Spanish. And it's like, should I test it in Spanish to make sure that it actually works like the way I want to? So these are things that you didn't really need to think about with the previous types of products, but with AI, you actually do need to consider these. So there are actually quite a few differences between testing AI tools and products and other types of products. Still, and then this one, probably the most common conversation I have with my clients. So in the old one, you build a website, more or less it will stay the same. I mean, unless something changes, of course, there are things that can go wrong and things that change, but like it pretty much works the same. With AI, the performance is changing constantly. I mean, I don't know if there's a week when there's not a new model coming out or something changing. So the performance of these tools and the models is just insane. So the data sources, training platforms, APIs, like all of this is changing all the time. And there are two ways to approach it. You can accept that the change is permanent. The change is going to keep happening. And this is a question I get a lot. Like, am I just going to have to keep going back to the tools and update it? Yes. Sure, that answer is yes. Like you will. This is not like building a table. This is something that is in constant change. And the dynamic nature of AI is just super different. If you want to build something that will stay exactly the same, you shouldn't build with AI, most likely. With AI, the change just keeps happening. Oh, Scott, go on.
To put a positive spin on it, we just
Yeah.
had someone yesterday who was having issues uploading documents,
Mm.
and we realized they were on a fairly old model. They were on
Mm.
4.0, which isn't that old, but older. And they just updated to the ChatGPT 4.1, and all of a sudden everything worked. So the other positive here is that sometimes the model improvements can paper over issues you might have either with data or your prompting. It actually gets better for you. So I think that's also nice is like change can be
Yeah.
positive because it actually fixes things for you without you doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, all the change is positive. Like everything's getting better. There are things that, like, for example, when we work on a monthly basis with clients where that were not possible on week 1 of that month. And on week 3, it is. So the change is, we're not, again, as humans, we're not really comfortable with change necessarily unless we train to be, which testing is a really good tool for. Um, but yeah, it's all positive. Like everything's growing, everything's expanding. You have way more available to you than you used to be. So it's really the reason I keep getting back to the mindset thing is that the mindset part really changes everything when it comes to this specific field. Uh, Change will keep happening, and it's all for the better. You will actually get more and more out of these tools at all times. And it's not like the old ways of doing things have disappeared. But if you're using AI, you can make use of the most optimal and the latest things that are happening. So embracing change is pretty much the best way to go. And then I think this is last one. So limited modalities, cultural context. Yeah, if you had a language, it probably just used that language. The modality, if you had text, it probably just used the text. Whereas with AI, you have the ability to go like omni-modal, multicultural, and always remember the bias. Never forget that anything and everything is based on something. The bias is kind of in there. You can test for it. You can make it better, but just be mindful that nothing is objective. So this, just to kind of like close this like comparison between the two, diversity in testing for multimodal input output is so important. So just remember to test with the diverse audience, test with as many kind of edge cases as you can. And if there is a potential, which I guess in the States especially, and in London as well, people have different mother tongues. They might try to use the tools in a different language. While it doesn't mean that you have to test every single language separately, just be mindful of that. People might try to use it in a different language. So remember those opportunities. Or they might be trying to use it in with a voice app or any different kind of way. They might want to try and upload images or whatever it might be. There is this kind of like multimodal nature to AI that we're entering, which is really interesting and has a lot of opportunities. So any questions, anything that comes to mind? I would love to hear if there anything that maybe came up from all of those comparisons. Have you noticed the differences between, like, I assume many of you have been building digital products before and are now. Go on, Catherine.
I was just, so I put it in the chat. I just wondered weirdly whether you could test. One of my apps is a leadership survey. So what kind of issues do you have? Is it visibility? Is it about your confidence, etc.? And then at the end, it will say, these sound like the things you want to primarily work on. Do you want to work on that with me as your coach type of thing? Then it might move forward to having a conversation with me. But I kind of want at the end to say, for Chipp to then say, how was this for you? Did you feel like you got answers that were relevant to you? Did you feel like I was leading you in any way? Did you know? And so can we do that? Because obviously I don't want it to interrupt the actual process. But before they go, it's kind of like before you go, I'd really like to hear how that went for you. Could we do that? And is that counting as testing, or is that kind of cheating?
I mean, getting feedback like in between or in session is really useful. I have that in my tools, for example, in the coaching sessions. I ask for a number in the beginning and in the end, and any kind of like feedback. So it's definitely, for me, it's a part of the experience, of the flow. So I think that's really, really good, and definitely testing it. I think like there are so many ways that you can get feedback, and also like quantitative versus qualitative. Like when you start analyzing Chipp chats. So for example, the reason I use numbers is that then I can just, connect it to a Chipp that will analyze the changes in the numbers between beginning and end, which kind of like automate some of the feedback gathering within the tools. So there are very different ways to do that. But I would definitely incorporate that if it works in your context.
Yeah, I like the idea that people can be free flowing and just say what you think. I don't want to lead you in kind of, you have to pick that middle of the road answer of I haven't quite decided, or neither yes nor no. But just free text, and then maybe Chip can do sentiment analysis where it looks for words with emotion in it, or I'm assuming you do that. So I haven't tested that. So that sounds fun.
One
Yeah.
way that people have done it that I think works pretty well is you can connect your chat logs to a spreadsheet, and then you can create another Chipp chat that has the spreadsheet as a knowledge source. So then you can ask questions off of the chat logs. So especially like Maria's case, if you're asking a consistent question, like in your prompt, it might say something like, after before they end, ask on 1 to 5 their experience, or ask them one way it could improve. And then in your kind of reference app, you could say, what were the most common responses to this question? And it'll find it. So that's a fun way to do it within Chipp. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you can obviously do sentiment analysis. Like it doesn't need to be just numbers in that, because the chips that you train can be quite intelligent in that way. And any other questions or experiences, differences between previous products that you might have worked with and now that you're working with AI? Something that's changed, or any question? Okay, no, let's move forward then. Cool. And feel free to ask in the chat if anything comes to mind. Ooh, so there are two ways to build products. The one is like the kind of like make it work, the clear way of like, you have a problem, you solve it, usually using similar elements that have existed before, and make it kind of the same as it used to be or what it is, but just make adjustments, make it better, make it work. And then there is the kind of like make it transform. And this relates to what Scott was saying, like actually the way that AI evolves, like gives us opportunities that just wouldn't exist otherwise. So there is actually so much potential to just transform whatever it is that you're working with, like make it so much better, make it so different, give different types of value from what you might be used to. So challenging the status quo, changing things, that requires testing in a different way. I don't know if you've seen this. This is kind of like it's my version of the double diamond that I use. So there are two parts to any creative process or creation process. There's the diverge, where you expand, you create more options, you create opportunities, you have a lot. If you've ever done like the kind of brainstorming of like, oh, I think I'll like come up with 1,000 ideas, and that would be the diverge parts. And then converge is like you have a lot of options, you have opportunities, and then you start analyzing and using the more rational mindset to come down from there. So first, create options, select options. It sounds so simple, but not a lot of us do it. A lot of us still go back to this. So we're trying to make sense all the way. So it's like I'm ideating, but I'm thinking when I'm creating those ideas, I'm like, oh, does this make sense? Does this make sense? When there is the other way of doing it, which is like just create what is possible, what might be possible, what is cool, what might be cool, and then you start selecting. So you don't do both of these at the same time. You do them one after another. So that's just a different way to approach it. So just go crazy and then go rational. When I used to work with a lot of engineers, I was like, they would get here, like go crazy, like let's just like see what this could be. And then they're like, yeah, but we need to make sure that it works. Yeah, we will make sure that it works, but not now, not when we're thinking about all the different things that could be. So it's just like having these two steps, one after another. So think about all the ways that are possible, or could be possible, and then start building it. Then start selecting like what makes sense. And in this, yeah, you do need to. Oh no, what is happening? My screen sharing went away. No, let me see. I lost my slides. There we are. I talk with my hands way too much, so I must have swiped something away. Let's see what we have. So, how to test this. now we're getting into the actual testing tips. So this is something that sounds so simple, but I can't even name how many times this has not been actually thought of when you start testing products. The first thing you need to figure out is, what is the question you need to answer? So when we start testing, quite often we just get like, oh, we'll do this, we'll have this many people, they'll do this, they'll run through. And you actually forget to think like, what is the question that I need to answer at the end of this? What is the one question that I really need an answer to in order to make better decisions, to move forward, or to make these chips better, or whatever it is? So what is the one question that you would like to answer, and base all of your testing plan, everything around that, so that you will get that one question answered. And the more like the kind of lower level of that is like, what is the one most crucial deliverable that you need to get right? What is the value that we get? What is the thing that we want that user to feel at the end of it? And that would be like the most important part of your product. So these two things, they sound super simple, but I've seen countless testing plans that don't answer either one of these. Because you should test the most crucial deliverables, not just like, is this button right here? Or like, these are nice things to know, but just when you're testing, make sure that you're testing the most important part of your product. So testing plan 101. If you have a pen and paper, feel free to write them down for your specific product or service. So why do we test? What is the question that we need to answer? Like I said, think about your product, think about the thing you would like to test, and answer this question. What is the one question I need to answer in order to make this product better? Do I need to maybe answer, what is it supposed to do? Is that the thing that you want it to do? What value does it give to people? Sometimes the value that they get from your product is not the value that you thought you're giving them. So also exploring that. Is it intuitive? Does it make sense? Does it handle the unexpected? So if you have someone who doesn't know how to use AI and they might be using it in a completely different way, how does it handle that? Is it biased? How could we make it less biased, etc.? And then the most kind of like concrete one, where should it live? Where should it be sold? If you already have a product or a tool or a chip that is, you know what it needs to do, it is delivering the value that you want it to give, people know how to use it intuitively, then like, where should it live? Where should it be sold? What should the pricing be, etc.? And all of these have slightly different ways to test them, right? And this is what Scott was asking about before. So who should you test with? Of course, you should test it with people who potentially would love it. So your like ideal users, your target audience. Those are some of the people that you should include in your testing. This is something I always do, is give it to someone who might not get it, someone who's not in the industry you're looking for, or someone who might not be super fluent in the tech that you have. You're kind of like least likely user. Someone who just will give you those like really random questions of like, what is this even? So I wouldn't make the whole testing group be these people, but I'd include at least one person who is not a part of your target audience, because those are the people that usually give you the most kind of like insightful, random insights that you might not even be able to look for otherwise. And then the third one is who could break it or hack it. They might have some of the ideal users attributes. So they might be, let's say you are building something for consultants in a specific sector. So they might be consultants, but in a completely different sector. So they understand the context of the tool in one way or another, but they come from a different angle. So these would be like, they have some potential part of the ideal user, but not all of it. They're not like 100% your target audience. They can also, like, if you have access to people who are maybe designers or tech people, of course, you can include them as well. But this would be more like going outside of the core target audience with one twist. And again, you can get ideas that you would have never considered from these people. What will these give you? So the first one, who would love it, they'll help you find and really like double down on the greatest value. So the things that are amazing about your product, these people are already in the kind of like target audience for your product. So they'll make sure that you're doubling down on what they really need and want. The ones that don't necessarily get it, they'll help you find the things that where it makes no sense. Like I, for example, test it with my brother often, and I give him zero background when I send him stuff. So I just say like, hey, here's a link, go see what it is. And he'll be like, it doesn't say what this is on this page. I didn't even think about it because I know what it is. So he would ask those questions that I would be blind to see, exactly like you said, Scott. Like the things that you're too involved and you're like too embedded in the context to see. These are the people who will point out like, I don't even know what this is based on this flow that you sent me. And then the hackers are the ones that will give you like different angles to the same topic. They will help you think differently. So it could be industry specific. So someone who's in a different industry but doing the same job, different demographic. So for example, different country. As you know, all of you who have traveled, you can do the same thing in like a million different ways. So if you have let's say a consultant in your country, but you have a consultant for the same topic in another country, they will give you completely different insights, most likely, than the ones who are like in that context. So make sure that you include people who are not in your like ideal target audience. So how do you do it? Here are just a few. Obviously, there are a million ways to test. These are some of the most common ones. So A/B or input variation. So testing versions against each other. And there's like a kind of like a sliding scale of like how different these versions might be. So there might be ones that are like almost the same, but with like teeny tiny variations, and you test them with two groups. Or you have a previous version that is not AI, and then you have the AI version of the same thing, which might be very different, but still delivering the same value. So finding the right level of difference between these two is key here. And the more variation you have, the more different the feedback will be. And yeah, it depends what you're trying to find out. And then diverse testing, so group testing. I cannot like emphasize this enough. Please test with the most diversity you can find. If you only test with 10 people who are exactly the same, you are going to get less diverse and potentially useful feedback than if you test with different types of people. And again, remember, we're not trying to get testimonials, we're trying to get feedback. We're trying to have them poke at stuff and be like, this makes no sense. So different ages, gender, culture, context, language, whatever it might be, just go as diverse as you can. And of course, you can do interviews, you can do observation studies. There are a lot of tools now that use AI. So you just like share your URL with them and you add questions to the flow and the person goes through it and you don't even need to be there for the testing. So these are good ways to do this type of testing. And then break it, test it with the intention of using it wrong. I think this we've talked about, I think, especially with like when it comes to like testing for tech issues, etc. But also like in user testing, like when you're trying to figure out what your value is, what your product should do, try to test it with the intention of using it wrong. Because some people will, and you will find out more things when you do that. So yeah, there are a million different testing approaches. It will always depend on what you're trying to find. So there's like live or online. I love doing live observation. So like if you can actually watch the person using it, because you can see what they're doing. You can do it live in person versus online, of course, moderated or unmoderated. This was what we were chatting about before. So like Scott mentioned, like you can link the data to the sheet and then connect it and then create another chip that will evaluate and analyze your use data. And then there's a really big difference between if you're testing a concept versus just like getting feedback on pricing or placing your products. So just remember that the questions and the ways of testing will depend what you are testing for. What is the question you're trying to answer? And then there's always the paid testers versus potential users. And this I want to emphasize here because a lot of people, when we have like we have a product, we have potential users, maybe we've crafted like an email list or we have potential clients, and we don't want to give them something that is not perfect, which is completely understandable. But we do need to get testing data. We need to get feedback. So you don't need to use your email list of potential clients, for example. You can actually just go on websites and get paid testers that represent the group that you're looking for. So there's no reason to not test just because you don't want to give the non-perfect version for your potential clients. Please just go and find other people, either paid or unpaid testers, but just test it with someone, whoever. Testing with your group of diverse friends is better than not testing at all. Always test over not testing. That's the kind of like key advice that I would give. So questions to consider for testing, like what do you want to learn? Again, what is the one question you want to get answered? And make sure that that testing actually helps you answer that question. So is it about pricing? Is it about audience? Is it about if this even makes sense? Does this bring any value to anyone? Do you want numbers, quantitative? Do you want deep insights, sentiment? Do you want more? For example, if you want to see how people might use it, then you might want to do interviews instead of just unmoderated online testing. So it really depends what you want to get from your testing. And do you want to see what they're doing, or do you just want to hear how they felt about it? So survey versus like really observing what they're doing. Don't overthink it. I know I gave you a lot, but the main thing is like, don't overthink it. Just test it with someone, as many different people as you possibly can. Just go out there and test it. It's better. What was the thing you said, Scott, in one of our calls? It's like better done than
Yeah. Done is the enemy, or no, perfect is the enemy of done, right? Like if
exactly.
she's trying to be perfect. Yeah, and I can take
Exactly.
Luther had a great question too about so I think you're talking about testing like apps that we build, like Chipp chats, versus like our development cycle. But like what I think about when testing a chat is the key questions I know people will ask and making sure it works first for those, and then giving it to like a generous group of users. So maybe it's internal, or maybe it's like your most passionate users who won't care if things are weird, and then seeing the chat logs and then fixing based on that. So Mari and I were just working with a client that, they have a lot of knowledge sources. And one of the issues was it was pulling not the most recent reports. So they have a page of 20 reports and they want to get the 3 most recently published, versus what it was doing was pulling just 3 random ones. That's a really good example of like, I would never have thought to ask that question. And that was one of the first things they asked. And then we can go back into the prompt and say, if someone asks about this topic, always look for the most recent ones, right? So you give like broad instructions, and then you get a little bit whack-a-mole where you're like getting into specifics. One thing I would do in the prompt is use headings to help you find those areas. So like I would do something like example, or like I don't know, like context, something like that. And then underneath that have each question. So it might be something like example with a 2. So like the 2 hashtags is like an H2 if you're familiar with the document. And then it might be like sales questions. And then it might be like opening hours, right? Or something like that. And then underneath sales questions, I would put anything in there that I definitely wanted to say or refer to. And that could be literally like, quote, say this, or it could be more like, when answering, maybe it's like research questions. When answering research questions, always pull the most recent reports possible. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, Luther, but yeah, I think like funnel style, like solve the big problems and then get more specific over time.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's from like the service design academic side of like doing user research, more is not better for like, especially when you're looking at the concept and the value level. You actually mostly want to go for depth. And there's like kind of like a magic number of 8 people to test per round. So if I was to test a product that has not been tested, I would do like 2 or 3 rounds of 8 testers instead of having like 1 round of whatever, 30 or 25. So it's like iteration rounds, and with 8 people or 10 people, because after 8, it starts to saturate, unless you have like 10 completely different people or 20 completely different people. But like 8 people in a few rounds, you'll get more insights, most likely, especially if it's a diverse group of people, than getting like 100% panel according to a specific demographic. If you're trying to test anything kind of like what this product should be. If you're trying to test like how much would you pay for this, then obviously it's very different. But anything kind of more concept related, or like, is this useful? Is it doing what it should, etc. Yeah, so then what? Prioritize when you get the results, prioritize what's important. So as I know we've talked about this with Scott, people will ask for all kinds of things. People will give all kinds of feedback, and it's going to be up to you to decide like what's important. What do I need to change now? What is soon? What is later? And what not to change? Not all feedback. And I think this is something that people sometimes get a bit scared with. It's like, but they give this feedback. Do I need to do all of it? No, you don't. You don't need to do any of it if you don't want to. You can test with 100 people and do 0 changes based on what you hear. It's really up to you to decide what you do with that feedback and how you use it. And remember the difference between quantitative and qualitative always. And if you can, just use both. Being open for changes. So knowing, and I think Scott, maybe you can give like a nugget of wisdom on this, like being open to change, being open to actually explore and expand and make those changes, but being super clear on what the purpose or the value is that you're giving, versus like being super dedicated to like, this is what we've decided to build, so we will build this, is not necessarily the optimal way to look at it. But like, what is the service? What is the purpose? What is the reason we're doing this? And then prioritizing those changes based on that mission and the value that you're aiming to give.
That's really good. And I think like one thing I found is it's often helpful to duplicate your app on Chipp and try variations in different boxes and then almost A/B test them. And sometimes you get too specific and like you have this issue, which is like they call it lost in the middle, where the AI forgets what it's doing or it has conflicting instructions. You might not think it is, but if you try to avoid words like always or never, because if you have that word like always do this and then later on you ask it to do something else, it either won't do it or you don't know which one it'll take. And so sometimes what I've done is like if somebody's not getting the answers they want, I just click the 3 dots on Chipp and duplicate, and then just say you are a helpful assistant, and then just like start fresh and ask there and see if it's actually better. That'll duplicate over the prompt, so you can start to like try and remove and add things. So I think that's a good way to test. That's probably before you give it to someone else as you're doing that early testing. But yeah, that's a fast way, I think. And like Mari and I with the client we were just working on, it was, the V1, V2, V3, and we decided V2 is actually better than V3. So then we actually gave them V2. So that's often the process, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can try the 2x2 matrix that we saw. Like you can create one version that is just giving it a role and a goal and context and like be creative. And then one can be like really specific step by step. And then you can give those 2 very different versions, same value, but completely different ways of prompting, and see which one actually serves the users and the purpose that you are trying to achieve better. Because again, you might not know until you test it. So the whole goal of testing is to get those answers from somewhere else, so you don't get stuck in your head being like, oh, but maybe this is better, but maybe that's better. No, just build both, test it out and see. And then you'll have more to go with. Next steps. I would love you to all, who are the 3 people you'll test this week? I challenge you to write down 3 names right now. 3 people. Yeah. Who are the 3 people you will test with this week? Write down 3 names, whatever chip you have, whatever tool you have, just make sure you have 3 names written down on a piece of paper and commit to sending a chip to those people. And I think Luther is a good candidate for sending it at least to 3, actually 3 times 3, I think, because we were talking about the rounds. So yeah, that's the goal. Goal of this is to actually go out there and start testing. So find one person who would love it, one person who's your target audience, one who is not ideal but might benefit from something in the app, and then someone who might break it or hack it, someone in your target audience, but might be in another industry or country. Get one of each, and you'll already have quite a nice set of feedback coming your way. I added the Chipp to surf the waves because you can, of course, grow in mindset, get better at breaking often, getting feedback all the time, getting used to it. But you can also surf the waves with Chipp and just keep testing, make the best out of what you have. Yeah, questions. That was all. I know it was probably a lot, a lot to go with. Any questions or insights, anything that came up? And thank you so much for staying here and yeah, being involved.
I would love to hear what people are building. So, Marin, I haven't met you, so I love that you're in Dar es Salaam. That's amazing. What are you kind of working on with AI? Is there something you're trying to test right now? And if you can't talk, you can type. So there you go.
Sorry, I think my internet is breaking.
I got you now. Yeah.
Can you repeat your question?
I was just asking, how are you kind of using AI, or what are you looking to test? I put it in the chat if that's helpful. You can answer it there. Yeah. And Tina, how about you? I know you have internal uses potentially.
Well, I'm going down a rabbit hole over here. So, as we've been talking, I've been building a widget, which I suck at. So, there'll be a lot of testing on that. So, we'll see.
Luther, how about you? You got a couple ideas you're working on, I'm sure.
I'm thinking about building a testing request bot. You leave your details, and I'll come test your app for you. But otherwise, I'm building things like mostly around customer support or booking time, and querying services. Taking some of the lift off through Chipp. Would love to know more about integrating that through WhatsApp as well. So I'm here for that too.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
WhatsApp is amazing.
Yeah, Maria's your person for that. She's the deepest on using WhatsApp. I think we have a disadvantage being in the US. None of us are like that active on WhatsApp. So it's good to have other perspectives from all of you.
Yeah, also Meta is when you talk about black boxes, like Meta is one. It's like a hack and put together kind of thing. But yeah, it works really well on WhatsApp. And I think WhatsApp is very good for testing in general because it's such a low point of entry when you're already using WhatsApp. So any AIs that you might build and want to share and sell in other contexts, just put them on WhatsApp and have people test that. They're already there. So
That's where I was going with this in my mind. And when it comes to testing, it's such a WhatsApp certainly here it's used everywhere, right? And so it's so easy for sending people links or inviting people to the chats and testing it that way.
yeah, 100%. You can do exactly the same kind of like analysis on the other end because the chat logs get recorded and all of the other stuff we get. It's just easier for the users to test it out. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's great because you see the chat logs, and so you're able to see like, if you've done any user testing or qualitative research, it's like one thing is what they tell you. It's even better when you can see what they do, and you don't have to rely on their retelling of what they did. So having that like paper trail of being like, they said it was really good, but they did ask like all these questions, like in frustration, it's different.
Yeah. And one of the things I always ask is like, if you can give people access to the tool after and you see if they actually start using it after the testing, that's the best way to see, because you can always ask like, oh, would you like to use this? And then they say, yeah, sure. But then if they actually have the ability to use it and they choose not to, or they choose yes, like they choose to keep using it, I mean, that's your feedback right there. So maybe not even, you don't need to limit the testing into that one session in the same way as maybe you should have before, which is like, hey, keep using it if you want, and we'll see.
Cool.
Amazing.
Well, it looks like we need a meetup in the UK as well. So Luther, Catherine, if you want to get a little London meetup going, we love doing those. Maria's doing it in Guadalajara. We have folks in South Africa and Brazil doing the same. Marin, if you want to talk to the folks in Dar es Salaam, that would be amazing. If I could get back there, that would be incredible. You find an excuse.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So happy to support all of you. And I think this will all go on to the Academy. So you can maybe speak to that, Maria, before we close.
Yeah. So you'll find the recording in the Academy, and we're gonna turn this into like a simpler module. So it's gonna be cut down into pieces a bit. So it'll be shorter snippets if you want to go back as well. So you don't need to hear all of it at once when you're ready to start going out and testing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Good.
Can't wait to hear what comes out of the testing as well.
Great to hang out with all of you.
Yes. Amazing. See you all soon. And
See you all soon.
as always, we're on Discord and we're on Disco. Always a messenger way.
Guys. Really
Thanks,
good.
guys.
Good to see you all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.